Welcome to the Lisa Show Book Club. We're really excited that you're here. We have Chanté and Alexis. Thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome.
Today, we are joining our conversation on Alone Together by Sherry Turkle. And we're talking about, this really is part 3, but we're talking about chapters 5, 6, and 7 today. And if you haven't gone back and seen part 1 and 2, please do. We had some really great discussions about really the foundation and the beginning of this book. And so I want to dive into part 3 today. And really, in going over 3 chapters, I was trying to think of like, what do these 3 chapters sort of have in common? And I really think that it begs the questions of like, how can we hope for technology to do for it? You know, what is it, our hope for robots, for technology, for our connection? Like, do we want the right kind of things? Are we asking the right kind of questions? And before we started, we were just having a really fun conversation about how sometimes we think, you know, we have the right sort of mind frame, like with our kids and stuff, like, don't do that, do this. It's so easy for us to tell. But it's hard to tell, like, when you're in the middle of it, when you're in the thick of it. And we don't really have a lot of hindsight with technology. And I really like when it starts right out with complicities, that artificial intelligence between a mechanical view of people and a psychological, even spiritual view of machines. And I wondered what you really thought about the overall ideas of why we have machines and what we hope we can do with them.
Oh, I think that's brilliant, honestly. Do you want to go?
I do. I mean, we're always.
I know. We always
listen, this is why we have you.
But I did feel like when I was reading it and just thinking of my life in real time, I was like, okay, life just seems so busy. We're going in so many directions that I would want it to support the areas that don't need human connection, so I have more time for more human connection. But it seems like we're trying to replace it and use it to, I don't know, get more human connection, but it's not human at all. And so I think that that's where I could recognize, even in my own life, where maybe I have it flipped, where I'm like, when is it convenient and provides more time for family, friends, and connection and deep relationships? And when is it taking away from that?
Ooh, yeah, that's an important distinction.
Yeah, no, that's really sort of where my mind was going, of just like, it's such a brilliant invention, right? It does so much. And even just reading these chapters and how children are connecting to them, but my mind kept going, there's a deeper need. You know what I mean?
Yeah, especially for kids.
Yes, especially for kids. And I have so much mom guilt around electronics and technology. It eats me alive. But then there are times where I'm like, this is really useful. It's serving a purpose. I think it's separating that. Is the purpose to fill a human void? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Or is the purpose outside of that that's actually really beneficial?
Yeah, I was so struck with when they introduced new robots, you know, Sherry with this book talks a lot of case studies, right? And she's like, okay, so I gave these robots to these kids and this is how they responded. And I was so struck by how they wanted the robots to love them.
Yes.
They as an adult, we kind of play along and we might be deceived, but we sort of go in and out of it. But the kids are like, do you think it likes me best? And things they're looking for, just like they're looking, we know when they're looking for our approval and attention as parents and as adults and things like that. And they're trying to make that kind of initial connection. And a lot of times, I'm the same way. I feel this mom guilt about I think, did I give that kid a phone too early? And are they on the internet too? And my kids are older now. And so it's well, I'm gonna have to live with it, you know. So I'm sort of dealing with it now, but it was sort of half and half, right?
Yeah,
when my older kids were older, and then I made mistakes, and then I changed my mind. But I do notice, though, that all of our conversations are about the time that our kids are on it, not the reason why. And I think intent means everything. I really do.
Yes, it does. And we were both just talking as we drove here about our kids when they get really stressed. It's they want it as a decompression and a distraction.
Yes.
But then it's well, are we teaching them coping skills to not have to turn to that zone out? Mm-hmm. I do it. I want Netflix at 11 o'clock at night, you know? Yeah. And so it's but what coping things are we skipping? because we're
That's
letting
so
them
important.
just de-stress with electronics.
And sometimes it's causing more anxiety because then they're like,
Absolutely.
"Well, they're doing that without me, and who's really my friend? What does that mean? I
Yeah.
haven't seen him in real life, but we text all the time."
Yeah.
And I mean, that's what was interesting to me, the chapter about children
Yeah.
and how it mentioned when it malfunctions, like the robots would malfunction and the like anger and depression and the feelings that these kids felt. It's like, oh my goodness, I actually see that with my children when I abruptly am like, get off the iPad.
Yeah.
You've had enough. Their emotions are so extreme and intense
yeah.
because they're getting something from that, but it's not sustainable, you know?
Well, even on the way here, I text our babysitter and I said, will you give my little 8-year-old 5 minutes warning, let him know that he needs to get off of
a
his
warning.
game.
Yeah.
Yes. And so he right now is doing half-day schools because he's had some medical issues. But I can just tell even how he's relied on that as we've gone to doctor's appointments. And when he'll get really stressed and anxious and I'm trying to talk to the doctor, I'll say, oh, here's my phone. And then it's like, we're creating a generation of kids that don't know how to sit at a meal, sit in a doctor's office. And it's like when you give it, you almost have to decide, is this worth it? And what could I be teaching instead? And so even there was the other day, I told him, I was like, just go walk down the hall and then come back in. And that was better because he just
wow.
needed to move. And we
Yeah.
were with a specialist and it was a long, lengthy appointment. But he could just go out, walk down the hall and come back. And I'm like, oh, see, I'm like thinking his needs are something else than what they are. And the phone will fix that, but it really doesn't fix it.
Ooh, I think that's such an important point because there's always uncertainty in parenting anyway.
Yes. Right.
We're always like, am I doing this right or what should I do? And so it's interesting to like look at what problems we think technology is solving and what they actually are.
Yeah.
Right.
I was just struck by how much the kids just wanted the robot to love them.
Yes.
How much they
Yes.
wanted to like unprovoked like love it. Like a
Yes.
family member, but different. It's different than like a dog or a cat. I don't know.
Right,
To
yeah.
me,
Well, and something that I
don't
noticed
know.
too in that was even just the awareness of being distracted, but being there. And I think you can see how the kids wanted that connection with a robot, but they want that with us also, where it's like we might be in the room, but if our mind is somewhere else or we're not making eye contact or engaging, the kids are feeling that. And it's making them question, just like with a robot, is like, do they
totally.
love me? What do they think of me? And it's so
Didn't you think it was
fascinating.
interesting, their response to indifference?
Yes.
Like if they felt like
it was worse.
Yes,
It
it was
was.
worse to that indifference. And I'm like, as a parent, do we ever come off that way? If we're distracted doing other things, how are they internalizing it? It was really interesting.
Ooh, yeah. And how does that affect their development? Because I
Right.
think it's one thing for us to be able to do it with our life experience like behind us, but as kids are developing and developing their brains, what kind of adults will they be and what will they expect from human relationships
Right.
if they're raised by robots? And I know that sounds so dramatic, but like we're already dealing with things we never thought we would. Like during COVID, like we all were online and our kids
Yeah.
were all online a lot more than they normally are,
Yeah.
no matter what. We all were. And if you compound that with then like what AI can do now and the conversations that we're having, like it is getting a little bit away from us. And I what I like about this book, Alone Together, is that it acknowledges like, okay, so what function do we want it to, how do we want it to serve us? We're still in control. I mean, science fiction
Right.
drama aside.
Yes.
I mean, they might already be in control. Please treat us, our robot masters, with kindness and love. Thank you. But I mean, we can ask ourselves those questions, and it's this idea of like, I love how she talks about this idea of like playing God, because and she talks about in fiction and myth, human beings imagine themselves playing God and creating new forms of life. And now that we have these sociable robots, it's kind of like we're experimenting with this like new dynamic and how we see them. But she said, we are drawn by our humanity to give these machines something of the consideration we give to others because we reach for mutuality. We want them to take care of and to take care about us, and then we'll care for them. But then we're also setting them up to hurt us. So
Yes.
if we, just like people do, it's weird because like if we want our kids to learn from them and use it as a tool, if the more human it is, the more that we're inviting, if it's a mutual relationship, for them to hurt us.
Yes.
It's weird.
And I
It
mean,
is
that is
weird.
true that is how human relationships are. You
Yeah.
draw close and you are putting yourself at risk to be hurt, disappointed, and so that's a really interesting piece.
Well, I was even thinking as you're mentioning that, I'm like, how often do my kids say, I'll ask Alexa versus ask mom or dad at this point?
Or figure it out.
Yes,
Yeah, or figure it out. Yeah.
Well, and even too, people will put cameras in their house and run errands and watch their kids through a camera. So even you saying like robots, you have to think of it in all of those different ways where it's like, are they kind of taking care and doing childcare and helping with homework?
Well, and right from the beginning of the book, it's like robots are created. And in Japan, they've already really like primed the society as like, oh yeah, we're all for this, to take care of their kids as babysitters and their elderly population as caregivers. And everybody has a different reaction to it.
Yeah.
Right. And those are the kind of conversations of like, okay, so would you let a robot give medicine? Would you let a robot just observe like a camera? Would you let a robot like rock a baby to sleep? Like what would but we have like swings.
Yeah.
Like you have to like deconstruct it. Is it more threatening or less threatening if it looks like a human? Like it's so weird.
So fascinating.
It is.
And I feel like Alexis and I mean, we go and speak and train, and one of our fundamental topics is people are priority and learning empathy, connection, human connection, the power of belonging. And so reading this, it's like, where does this fit in?
Yes.
That's why I think that you were the perfect people to come talk about these particular chapters, because you're so passionate about connection and people come first. Like, how do we talk about it though when technology can do so much for us? Where is the line, do you think?
Oh my goodness. You go first on that.
In the book, it mentions the one thing that the technology can't do, and that's empathy. They can't have empathy. And I think as humans, I think we're losing the ability to really sit and feel with someone else. And even I notice, like with my older kids, because I have a 12 and 14-year-old and then an 8 and a 6-year-old, that even just my parenting style, and I'm sure the influence of technology that didn't exist, that my older kids, I'm like, I think they were able to make some like human connection and ability to see things a little differently than my younger. And I was way more intentional with my older two, but it's like that we will never get from robots. And even if we get it, it will be synthetic still in a way. And
It'll be an imitation of a human.
it will. It will be. And that ability is just really the foundation of humanity. Like if we get to a point where we are no longer making those connections and we can't connect that way, it terrifies me. It literally terrifies me. So I think we have to ask ourselves those hard questions. Is this replacing any type of human connection? And what could we be teaching instead?
Yeah.
And just look at kind of the bigger, I don't know, and then what, Like, so, and then what does that mean?
And I mean, I think we're in a society where we're always looking for improved replacements.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, we are.
What's going to be
What's better?
faster? What's better? What will work the same, in medicine, in all kinds of areas. And the fact of the matter is, I don't think we can replace human connection.
I love that you said that.
I
'cause
don't think it's
I
replaceable.
just feel that in my heart.
Yeah.
And I just thought, well, are we trying to do that? I think sometimes subconsciously we're trying to do that. Like maybe, and that's why I think we need to talk about it a little bit more, especially with our kids who don't have as much life experience about it.
Right.
You may think that you're just playing a game or connecting, but all of this time, like you're not, what are you not doing and connecting with real people?
Yeah.
One of the things that I ask my kids in social situations too, just trying to make good choices with friends and relationships of like, how does it make you feel after?
Yeah.
And I think even with technology,
Oh, especially.
we can see like, okay, I binge watched this show. Yeah, I was able to kind of escape for a minute, but then how did I feel after? And even just with people and groups. And I think it's important for us to recognize that. And I can tell when my kids have been watching TV too long.
Oh, yeah.
They're grumpy and rude, you know?
And they're just kind of out of it. And and Sherry in the book says that loneliness makes people sick, and the robot is presented as a cure, right? And then they show all of these like different cases where they're used as therapy or in therapeutic ideas, like for elderly people and, seniors having somebody or something to talk to. And Sherry takes a step back and says, but like in the long term, do we really want to make it easier for children to leave their parents and not be with them? Is that like, as we learn to get the most out of robots, we may lower our expectations of all relationships,
Right.
including those people. In the process, we're betraying ourselves.
Yes.
Because if we are just, I even think of this on a small scale. So like robots, it seems like, well, it's not that bad. It hasn't happened yet, but it has, like,
Yes.
like with phone calls and texting and how much we see people face to face and how often and for what reason. We just want them to get back to us right away, right? Like we expect this immediacy from our relationships that we didn't even a generation ago.
It's so
and even
true.
that is affecting our relationship.
It is.
It is. And I find I get really frustrated with like automated systems.
Yeah.
Because I always have a story. Like, I'm like, well, I need to tell them that this happened because of this. And it's like, press 1 if you want. And I get
the exception.
exactly. I'm like, I just want to explain
They
to them.
don't even have the option that I need. you
Right.
know?
Yes,
Yeah.
the nuance.
It's
to my
true.
needs, but it is true.
Yeah,
It
and,
is.
and it's just how do you have an electronic device, a robot, whatever it may be, pick up on those human nuances? I remember when I had my first child, and I was a paranoid postpartum disaster, but he just had all these really mild little cues where he would grunt if he wanted food, or he would do these little things, and I wouldn't let anyone else watch him except for my mom because I was like, she knows his cues. You know, she understands those. And so I just imagine robots as a caretaker. Is there any way to program in that level of connection? You know what I mean? It almost scares me.
I know, because what if there were?
I know,
Like,
and that's
like
just as
that's,
scary.
that's just as scary.
It is,
It's
in a
like,
different
is
way.
that the question?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Or even, I know this is so dumb, but like after the pandemic, and I'm totally grieving, and I'm like the lowest lonely I've ever been, and like this is so dumb, but like even like going to the grocery store and now it's self checkout, or you go get some food and it's just drive through or whatever. Like you can live your life in a normal way and not see or talk to anyone and still take care of all your needs. And
That is so true.
do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I never really noticed it to that degree until I was really like, because I just want to chat you up in the grocery line. And I know people hate that, and I'm sorry. But like, it's like a need for me. I want to, I go to the bank because I want to talk to the teller. And everyone's like, you know, you can do that all online. And I'm like, I know.
I know, but why would
just,
you want to?
And I just think it's like that, but exaggerated.
Right.
Well, we dug into some research about it was more the relationship to human connection and like longevity and healthy life and even how long you'll live. And a lot of the research leads back to a community in Italy where they have all of these interactions daily. It's not just about your close relationships, but it's about knowing the name of your mail carrier or the person at the grocery store. And one of the things it's showing is even when you do brain scans, a person, I'm anticipating what you're going to say, how you're going to react, and you don't get that on a screen. And you're not firing as many neurons. Your body doesn't have like the chemical response to like dopamine and serotonin. And it really creates depression, disconnect that leads to health issues that really makes you not live as long. So there are health reasons why this is so important.
Oh, I believe it.
Right. And the fascinating thing is, for me, it's the why. Why do we want to fill human roles?
Right.
Why? Because we know social health, we have to have human connection. Our blood pressure is lower, we live longer, all of these different things. And so why are we trying, the thing that sustains us, that gives us life is connecting to other people.
Totally.
Why are we trying to fill that?
Yeah.
It's almost like checking a box, we're too busy. I don't know. It's fascinating.
Well, and that's what Sherry says in the book too. She's like, we're all overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Like it's not, it's like, oh, can I take care of my aging parents and my little kids and work full time? Like,
Right.
it's not because we don't care and we're all
Totally.
narcissists.
Yeah.
It's because we have created this life of less leisure time with more technology, which was the opposite of what we anticipated.
Yes.
So maybe we should stop and go, okay, so if we're creating this world where everything is taken care of, well, shouldn't we want to spend more time on relationships
Right,
and less
right.
time on other things? So it's just reevaluating the why.
Yeah, it's social cultural shifts that put these extreme demands. You know, we're the working 40 hours a week. We have little kids. We have parents we need to care for. It's not humanly possible. So instead of looking at the structures that are putting us in the position, it's like, what can we externally bring in to fix it?
Yeah,
You know,
we're going to have a
Well, and
fix.
Yeah.
some cultures and societies don't do that. So what is it about us culturally as a whole that is trying to do that,
Ooh, yes. It's this idea of like what our long-term goals are.
Yes.
And I love that there's so many different studies where she like looks at it as an analyst and is really saying, okay, so we're more connected than ever. We can be connected to anybody anywhere, and we're more lonely and stressed out and anxious. And it seems like it should be the opposite. And I also like this idea then, if to take it to the extremes, then because some people will say, and she, outlines which scientist and everything will say, well, robots will be able to mimic human emotion. So it will give you that sense of empathy and connection. And then there's other, psychoanalysts who she's like, I don't think so. But I think it's so like they propose technology that we make more likable is going to sell more and be more connected. So we're going to make it more like, oh, this is fun. It feels like we're connecting to it a little bit more. It'll feel more human. And she is saying not everyone, like this is like the debate right now.
Yeah.
I do think it's really interesting that these advanced robots, Domo and Mertz, how they like went through all for those who are reading it, they talk about like, it's kind of like wearable robots and things like we're basically becoming cyborgs. And I was like, why would anyone want to do that? That's like science fiction. Then I'm like, and then they said in the book, do you carry your phone with you all the time? Do you have like those Google glasses? And I was like, and the watch and the, heart monitor and everything. And I thought, oh, we are kind of becoming part technology in order to live. And then they were talking about how people feel anxious and nervous when they're without it. And I was like, this is totally like a cyborg.
It is. It really is.
And so it is like this mesh of human and technology. And so I'm really curious where you personally draw the line between technology serving you and then you becoming integrated with it.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, so first of all, I think we have to back up. That honestly, before we started our business, like 2.5 years ago, we were not very tech savvy at all. Like, honestly, I think that even our husbands were like, "Okay, ladies, like seriously,
get into the 2000s here."
So, but now we've become more so just because we've had to learn all of these things just to run a business, to be able to even know what people are talking about in conversation. But I don't know if we've intentionally put a lot of thought into it. And I'm assuming that most people are in that same boat where it's like, oh, you want the newest phone because it does this and that will make your life easier, but you're not intentionally thinking about what you're replacing or not replacing, And so it is fascinating because I don't know, like this is just a hard thing to really look at yourself in the mirror about and be more intentional, not just with your families, but even with yourself.
It's the title of this book is so fascinating to me because it's a world Alexis and I stepped into when we started our Instagram platform.
Yeah.
You're alone. You're in your house alone, and yet you are talking on stories to thousands of people who are there alone, but we're kind of together. Is it filling what we need it to fill? And it's so interesting because we had our account hacked a couple of years ago, our Instagram account, and it was awful and horrible, but we had to go like a week and a half maybe without our Instagram account, and we started feeling loss. Like we were grieving our Instagram community. It's like something would happen and we'd be like, oh, we can't get on stories now and tell them.
Oh. And it's like we were actually visualizing them as people. Like we really, I feel like, have humanized our audience where it's like, the people.
Yes.
And there's some people that direct message a lot. And you get to know them and who they are. They tell you their stories. So even to have someone in a different country that wasn't even speaking English in our stories saying horrible things, like it was so aggressive and dark. And it's like we could watch it from another account. And it was wild to just see the shift of the energy that we bring to that platform. And then when someone took it over and they were threatening people, we lost thousands of followers, but they really eventually just want you to pay them to get your account back. But we really were like, what do we do? It was so weird that it felt so sad to us.
It felt like losing a friend. And it took both of us, we took a step back. Like, what have we integrated into our life that this this social media platform is so much a part of us now. And we can't even step away from it. And I find that way when I'm struggling emotionally and having a hard time. Like, I can't get on stories. I don't know if I'm ready to share this part of my life, because we are so authentic in what we share. And we never want to be that like fake or whatever. And it's a person to us. Beyond a screen. It's crazy to think about, but I'm like,
no, a person behind a screen, and it's an app.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly.
Like, that's what you're acknowledging. And I think that's very like vulnerable too. I appreciate you like being super honest about it, because that's how we feel about it. That's how we we personify these objects, and we come to see them as friends, and they don't even have a face yet. So imagine when they do.
Right. Well, and it is a little confusing too, because we actually have created real friendships through that platform.
Well, I think that's using the best of it, though.
Yes, it is.
Like, again, like, I don't want this to be all doom and gloom, because I do feel that we are still in control.
Yes.
Of where we want it. But I think we're so far down the road that we're not asking the right questions, and that we can kind of pause. I only have time for one more question that I wanted to ask you. It was at the very, very end. It says, in Japan, enthusiasm for robots is uninhibited. Like, they have ceremonies for like, even like worn out sewing needles. They have a ceremony to bury it, like, because it has provided so much. So of course they would do that for a beloved robot. And like, just thinking in the future about what it would, that robots will heal us. So we come full circle. Robots, the Japanese hope, will pull us back towards the physical real, right? Because it's something physical, a ceremony, right? And thus to each other. And then she says, one wonders. I love how she ended that, because it's like, so the technology can bring us back to the real world, right? Right?
It's such a fascinating thought, though.
So what are your final thoughts on that?
Instead of just going to what we want and need, which is human connection, we're saying, let's put a robot there to take us to it. So
Or
let's
an
go in a
app,
full,
or the web,
this
or
full
the-
circle to try and get to when maybe it's a straight shot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know.
But I think with the emphasis on performance and production, that it's enticing to think if something else can take care of everything else, so I can just focus on my relationships. But I just don't see it going that way.
Yeah.
At least it hasn't for me in my life thus far.
It really, really did speak to me, and especially these chapters. So thank you so much for taking the time to talk about these like big ideas. I think we solved it. No,
I think so. Done.
But at least we're having the conversation.
Yeah, I
and so
agree.
thank you for coming along to have these like difficult conversations
Thank
and
you.
for the good that you put out into the world.
Thank you.
And use it for the best. So thank you so much for watching the Lisa Show Book Club. We have been talking about part 3, chapters 5, 6, and 7. We've had a really great discussion. If you have time, go back and look at part 1 and 2 as well. Now, coming up next week, we're going to dive into part 4, and we're going to cover chapters 8 and 9. And we're really going to get to the idea of controlling technology. How do we do it? How can we do it better?